Well, the April 2024 JW Broadcasting has dropped, and it's quite an interesting broadcast. There's much to talk about, but I think David Splane's broadcast, David Splane's talk, is probably one of the most outstanding features of the broadcast. So, yeah, welcome to the live stream. I was in a live stream earlier on this morning. They found a South African, and something very interesting was brought up. He said something very interesting, a quote that I have to quote. He said that the truth does not fear scrutiny, it welcomes it. And I think that's it's not the most accurate quote, but you get the gist of it. I think the accurate quote is, truth does not fear investigation. Truth has the strength to withstand scrutiny. Truth that cannot be scrutinized is not truth. And I think we all know when it comes to teachings and their doctrines, they are very often, their doctrines doesn't stand up to scrutiny, as we've seen countless times. And the current JW Broadcasting episode is quite interesting because it's an attack on governments, it seems, especially David Splane's talk. It's an attack on governments. So, yeah, those who have joined, thank you for joining. Leave your comments in the comment section. I'll appreciate that. Let's get the chat going. I want to see if I can bring up the first clip of that JW Broadcasting episode that I want to show, and then let's analyze what it's all about. So I've got a few clips scheduled for the show, which I will bring up, and we'll analyze. So let's just see if I can bring up the first clip. Let's bear with me here, see if this is going to work. Not sure how good my connection is, but yeah, let's see.
Welcome, everybody, to JW Broadcasting. My co-host is Brother Isaac Murray, and his given name is Isaac, but we all call him Saki. I'm so glad to see you, Saki, because we've got a lot of work today. But first, you have quite an interesting background in the truth. Why don't you tell us something about it?
Thank you. I'll be happy to do so. I was born in South Africa in a very small town called Blyvoorheidsig. My father was not one of Jehovah's Witnesses. He initially opposed my mother, who was a dedicated servant of Jehovah, but later changed and was very supportive. My mother served Jehovah faithfully until her death in 2017. My grandfather and great-grandfather on my mother's side came into the truth in the early 1920s, simply by reading a tract. When I was about 10 years old, I read the book, What Has Religion Done for Mankind? And I was convinced that my mother had the truth. My 2 brothers and 3 sisters also embraced the truth at an early age. And to this day, all of them serve Jehovah faithfully in various parts of the earth.
Good.
While I was in my final year at school, I was invited to come to Bethel. And I started Bethel service in January 1965 in South Africa. Bethel was located in Elandsfontein, not far from Johannesburg. The Bethel family had only 55 members then. I had no particular skill, education, or training when I came to Bethel. 2 older brothers in the small family, Andrew Jack from Scotland and Gert Nel from South Africa took me under their wing because they knew I had so much to learn. They taught me how to apply Bible principles in the school of life as outlined in Proverbs 1 verses 1 through 7. Andrew Jack taught me how to work and reminded me always to glorify Jehovah. Gert Nel, an Afrikaans translator since 1947, taught me how to reason on scriptural principles. Both of them finished their earthly course long ago, but their example of loyalty still has deep impact on the loyal servants of Jehovah in Southern Africa. I had several assignments over the years in translation and in a printery, and I worked mostly in cleaning assignments. In 1976, I married Jean, who served as a pioneer in Durban. She was born in Malawi, but she grew up in South Africa. She set a great example for me by working diligently at every assignment that she was given. She always has a good attitude and works as to Jehovah and not to men.
Very good.
After serving at the South Africa branch for a few years, we were transferred to the United States Bethel in 1981. We've served in Wallkill, Brooklyn, Patterson, and are now serving in Warwick.
Well, thanks for sharing. I know I've been built up by hearing your experience, and I'm sure the friends feel the same way.
All right. I see somebody said in the section, ST says that it sounds like a convention experience. It certainly does. But I thought I'd play that first clip because it's very interesting as a fellow South African. And I thought I was in, and he mentioned that it was interesting that Isaac Murray was called Saki. Now, I just want to clarify that Saki is actually a nickname in South Africa for people or men named Isaac, but it's Afrikaans. It's an Afrikaans nickname, Saki. So that's why they call him Saki, and he was called Saki in that clip there. So, as I said, this helper to the governing bodies from South Africa, and he mentions that just a little bit of history. I thought it was very interesting that I just mentioned a bit of history about the South African branch and Bethel. As he said there, Saki said that the South African branch was headquartered in Elandsfontein originally, 1952, but it became too small. They expanded, it became too small, and then they eventually moved or bought, I think it was about 87 hectares of land, 60 kilometers away from Elandsfontein in Rudderkrans. And that's when the current Bethel, where the current headquarters was built, and it was dedicated in 1987. Now, when I was still a Jehovah's Witness back in my teenage years, that was when, during my high school years, that was when the Bethel, the current one, was built. And I remember quite a lot of brothers and sisters and youngsters were encouraged to go to Bethel, to apply to go to Bethel and not pursue higher education. I distinctly remember that. And many youngsters in our congregation that were my age applied to go to Bethel to go and work in the construction phase and in the finishing phase as well, which of course we know, as I said, 1987 South African Bethel was dedicated South Africa. So it was quite a privilege back then, I remember, to be accepted into Bethel service and to be part of the construction of this House of Jehovah, the Bethel headquarters in South Africa, in Roodekrans. And I had quite a few acquaintances and friends in the congregation that went there, and from the surrounding congregations. However, a lot of the experiences I heard through the grapevine during the construction, and from many who subsequently lived there for a while and was accepted into the Bethel home and worked there on a permanent basis. There was some very underhanded happenings going on at Bethel, and that was coming from the horse's mouth. People who went there, brothers who even, and this was some very interesting shenanigans going on behind the scenes. Nevertheless, I remember that brothers and sisters who were to strive to get into Bethel service, stuff, pursuing higher education or a trade after school. And people who went there were seen as always looked highly upon in their congregations. They are Bethelites, so that was the narrative that used to get spun during that period of Bethel being built. But I think Isaac Murray, he left, as he says in that clip, he left in 1981 and he was transferred to the US. So I don't think he of the Bethel, the building. Probably he was involved in the early stages. So I thought it was very interesting that they had a co-host from South Africa. I've never seen a co-host from South Africa being featured on JW Broadcasting. And my thoughts with this, South Africa, it is actually very interesting to see that now there is South Africa's growth is stagnant when it comes to the Jehovah's Witnesses, or dwindling. I mean, I vision where I was growing up in. I mentioned in the previous live stream that, at the height of, during the 80s and early 90s, the Watchtower Sunday study, Watchtower talk, and average at least about 120, 150 people at the Kingdom Hall on a Sunday. And I can tell you with certain, and the amount of people that go in there, they are averaging on a Sunday, Watchtower study and public talk, they are people attending the meetings. To the point that the Kingdom Hall, which was my Kingdom Hall where I grew up in, they are the isiXhosa congregation, because it's a building that's being, in my opinion, not being utilized correctly. So I mean, 30, 40 people at the height, of usually Sundays were your highlight. And I remember one Sunday, I think the most that we ever, highest number of attendance at a Sunday meeting when I was still in, was 200. That was an extraordinary circumstance. Have been a special talk. I'm not sure. I can't remember. But on average, the normal meetings were 120, 150 people, you know, and decline in Africa, in South Africa. And currently, I'm seeing a lot of South African ex-Jehovah's Witnesses starting to speak out and coming out of the wood. And this is where we get into the nitty-gritty of it, because so from the 5-minute mark, right up until the 19 about, you know, fighters against God. But I'm going to play the clip and then we'll analyze it afterwards. So let's see.
Through Isaiah, Jehovah is telling us that he will always accomplish his purpose. So no matter how powerful fighters against that purpose seem to be, they will always lose in the end. Remembering that will help us when we're faced with opposers who seem unbeatable. So I thought we might consider some Bible examples that illustrate the point. Take the days of King Saul, for example. Now, Jehovah sent Samuel to anoint the next king of Israel. And as recorded at 1 Samuel 16:1, God said to Samuel, "I will send you to Jesse, the Bethlehemite, because I have selected from among his sons a king for myself." Saul's replacement turned out to be David. He was Jehovah's choice. At some point, Saul himself understood that. In fact, according to 1 Samuel 23:17, his son Jonathan said to David, "You will be king over Israel, and my father Saul also knows that." Confirming this, on one occasion Saul said to David, "I know that you will surely rule as king." In spite of it all, Saul tried to kill David, and he had the support of a powerful army. Saul himself was apparently a very strong man. Still, it was God's will for David to become king, and Saul knew it. So, we ask, why did Saul keep on fighting? And whom was he fighting, really? Not just David. He was fighting against God. Saul was setting himself up for failure. No doubt Satan was egging Saul on. If Satan could cause just one of Jehovah's promises to fail. But in the end, the word of God prevailed. David became king. Jehovah promised the Israelites that he would give them the land of Canaan as an inheritance. The Canaanites had other ideas. They'd heard of Jehovah's powerful works in Egypt, but they fought against him anyway. They learned at their cost that fighters against God always lose. Now, if you were asked to name some prominent fighters against God in Jesus' day, you might think of King Herod the Great, the Jewish high priest Caiaphas, and maybe the Roman governor Pontius Pilate. Let's talk about them. First, Herod the Great. Now, as a Jewish proselyte, he is supposed to be waiting for the Christ, the Messiah. Yet, now that the Messiah has come, Herod wants to kill him. Herod is fighting against God. Does he win? No. Jesus escapes his clutches, and a few months later, Herod himself dies. Few mourn his death. In Jesus' day, the Jewish high priests were appointed and removed by the Romans. Now, High Priest Caiaphas was a skilled politician. He knew how to please the Romans, and because of that, he hung on to his job a lot longer than many others. And he had a powerful supporter, Pontius Pilate. With his connections, Caiaphas seemed untouchable. Pilate himself was very well connected. He had a good friend in high places in Rome, Lucius Sejanus. Now, maybe you've never heard of Sejanus before, but he was probably the most powerful man in the Roman Empire. The emperor left most of the major decisions to Sejanus. Now, he made many enemies, but they were powerless against him. Until the fall of 31 CE. At that time, Sejanus got on the wrong side of the emperor and was put to death. After that, the emperor commanded that anyone who had been friends with Sejanus was to be executed. How do you think Pilate felt? He must have been a nervous wreck. As we said, he and Sejanus had been very close. And now, a year and a half after Sejanus was executed, what do you suppose Pilate was thinking when the Jewish rulers cried out, "If you release Jesus, you are no friend of Caesar"? Some scholars believe that this was a factor in Pilate's decision to order Jesus' execution, to protect his own job. Did he protect it? No. Pilate wasn't immediately struck by lightning. But less than 4 years after he sentenced Jesus to death, he got into big trouble and was recalled to Rome. With no powerful friend to defend him, Pilate was removed as Roman governor. What happened next isn't clear. Some say Pilate committed suicide. Others say he was banished. Whatever happened, it wasn't good. When Pilate lost his job, Caiaphas lost his protector, and soon he was removed as high priest. Thus, 2 fighters against God, Pilate and Caiaphas, were dispatched soon after they committed their greatest crime.
All right. So David Splane, I've taken liberties to shorten the whole section where he rambles on about enemies or fighters against God. But the gist is he rambles on for about 15 minutes about, fighters against God and in Bible times and in modern times. And then he goes on about the consequences that these people supposedly faced, either losing their jobs, losing their positions, being put to death, or simply the entire broadcast. What is so interesting, and David Splane is leading up to something here. We all know what it is, and we'll look at that clip just now in a moment. But everything is fear-based. It's religion and cults and high control groups thrive on fear. And this is exactly what David Splane and the entire JW broadcasting video is about. It's all about fear, but it's all about manipulation as well, as we'll see. We've seen it's about manipulation. It's about instilling fear into you, obey or follow Jehovah's direction or the governing body's direction, actually. So fear-based tactics, but it also shows their presumptuousness and their entitled these people are, when it comes to this type of thing. It is nauseating to watch how entitled and presumptuous these people can be. And as I said, the fear-based tactic is something that is a whole and other cults, the Plymouth Brethren and so forth. But fear is the one thing that they thrive on in trying to instill into their members, to stay, or the consequences. It's a mind control tactic. It's a mind control, means of trying to keep people in. And it's actually sickening. And I actually speak about in my second book, Cults, How They Work. There's a chapter on mind control that where I speak about. I call it the loaded gun technique, where, and I know David Splane rambles on in the JW broadcasting, but I call it the loaded gun technique because it's almost like as the cult holds a loaded gun to the cult member's head and says, "You will lose your job if you don't obey us. You will die if you don't obey us. You will lose your friends and family." Right? And that's what they use. They use that fear. Loaded bullet in that loaded gun, in that mind control tactic, is the fear of losing family. There's no doubt about that. That does happen. But the others, in my opinion, are all blanks. All blanks. So, yeah, fear of losing friends and family is an actual consequence of not going along with the cult's beliefs, and when you stand up to against them. So, yeah, let's see if we can look at what David Splane actually goes on to say next, which is, yeah, let's see if I can bring this up. If you can just bear with me for a second. Yeah, fear is something that truly is, something that these cults thrive on. And here's the thing: even before I get to the video, even as a young person growing up in the organization, if you look at the books and the depictions in their literature, it's all fear-based. It's about demons and about being, killing, genocide, and Satan, and oh man, it's yeah. Yeah, this doesn't seem to be working. Let me try this. I'm going to share my screen. Excuse me for the yeah, I'm just trying to bring up where David Splane actually he goes on this rant. So let me see if I can get this clip going. Technology sometimes. Yeah, this next clip is where David Splane actually goes on a rant and tries to threaten governments and people in high places, which is actually quite laughable if you look at it. So just give me a second, yeah. Oh, man. So yeah, technology is failing me this moment. But anyway, if I can get it up and going. But David Splane goes on a rant where he threatens the government. I mean, the governments that, because of what happened in Bible times, how they will be eventually destroyed, or they're fighting against God. They are fighters against God, which is actually quite presumptuous. And yet we know that currently Jehovah's Witnesses, the Watchtower organization, has lost their case in Norway. Number one, Norway, in terms of state funding, because of their shunning policy and how children are treated in the organization. So they've been deregistered, they've lost their funding. Not like New Zealand, Russia, and many states in the US, the organization has come under immense scrutiny for their policies and their practices with regard to, number one, their handling of child sexual abuse cases, and number two, their shunning policy, especially how children are being, treated as adults and shunned. And that is what prompted the change in their shunning policy with regards to greeting disfellowshipped ones at the Kingdom Hall. We've seen that. That was, the governing body decided that it's now okay to greet somebody who's been disfellowshipped at the Kingdom Hall, which is never, which is a new thing. And of course, we all know why that happened, because they were trying to appease the government, to try and get the governments to Norway. We still greet those people now, although the change has just recently been enacted by the governing body, and their policies has been changed. But their handling of child sexual abuse cases is still an issue in many countries. Their shunning policies is still an issue in a lot of countries, which is problematic. Their non-reporting of these cases, and we see this happen almost on a monthly basis, where these things are reported in mainstream media. And what is so interesting is, even when you show Jehovah's Witnesses the mainstream media reports about these things, about child sexual abuse cases, the cognitive dissonance is so strong, because they will tell you, do not believe everything that's portrayed in the media, and it's frustrating, because the cognitive dissonance, as I said, where their minds trying to make sense, and short circuits trying to make sense of what they see, although it's the truth, and they can, they can look it up for themselves, about how this is in the media. It's been proven. There's legal cases going on, but they say, no, don't believe everything you see in the media. So yeah, the entitlement. I'm sorry, I can't bring up David Splane's actual video with the technical issues, but the entitlement is really nauseating. To think that because they serve the God Jehovah, everybody needs to listen to them. Everybody needs to listen to them, because you will be destroyed. Bad things will happen to you, and that's what they've got, But if you look at their fight, I mean, Jehovah's Witnesses, the Watchtower, has just appealed the case in Norway, where they lost they've been deregistered and lost state funding. Why would you want to appeal the case? And it's so disconcerting because, and disingenuous of the witnesses, because they've made a statement on their website where they've stated that they're appealing the case, but they don't give the background to it, the full background to it. And one of my latest videos, I actually break it down, because they make it seem as if the government is totally deregistering them and not allowing them to practice their religion in the country, and not allowed to go out in the preaching work, which is not true, because the court documents still state that they are allowed to practice. They are allowed to go in their house-to-house ministry and field service. That is not the issue. We are just not going to fund you anymore. We're going to deregister you. You won't be able to get funding, but you can still practice as a religion. But they spin the narrative that it is, they can't do any of those in Norway, especially. We know in Russia they are banned, and anybody caught doing the preaching work or witnessing or having meetings, they will get thrown into jail. We know Russia has a very hardline stance against the witnesses, and not only the witnesses, a few other denominations and sects as well. But Norway has been very lenient. And what Norway is saying is, we put the ball in your court. We are putting the ball in your court, Watchtower. You abide by these regulations that all other religions need to abide by to be able to get state funding. The ball's in your court. We are not stopping you from worshiping. It's just that we're not going to give you any more funding. But that just shows you that they've now appealed the case. And it's all about the bottom line, because it's millions they are losing. If the money wasn't so important, they would just carry on because that's not being banned. They're preaching work and holding meetings, and that's not being banned. But it's all about the bottom line. It's all about the money, as we all know. That's the crux of the matter. So yeah, and something interesting I said chat as well, and something interesting that Bolalang mentioned in an earlier broadcast that we were in the chat with, earlier live stream. He said the biggest mistake that the Jehovah's Witnesses made was to show the governing body's faces. Because before JW Broadcasting, they were, I remember, before they were put themselves on the internet, it was almost like these people were a phantom. It's, they were these, you had to imagine what they were like and who they are in your mind when they used to speak about the anointed and the governing body, but since they've expose themselves and we can see who they really are and who they really were now on video, a lot of people realize, man, these are just normal people like you and I. Just normal people like you and I. And I think everybody's shocked, because a lot of people make fun of Stephen Lett and his animated character. But and I think it's so true that Bolalang says on JW Broadcasting for all to see, we've realized these are just normal people like you and I. No different. And I think that was a huge mistake, but also because now their doctrines are so easily scrutinized because of the internet, and what we know that's out there in the media. I just thought, tonight I'll do a live stream and talk about these things. If anybody wants, comments in the comments section. I know Esti's the JW Broadcasting episodes. And we all know that, the memorial is past, and and there was a special talk before the memorial, like they always have. But I noticed also, just to touch on the fact that how the numbers are dwindling, especially in South Africa. I noticed even with the special talk and the conventions in and around, the area where I live, it is way, way less. The attendance is way less, a third probably of what I can remember back in the 80s and the 90s and the early 2000s. Way less. So yeah, very interesting. There's a shift. I think South Africa especially has seen a huge shift in terms of people now starting to speak out. Many ex-JWs are coming out of the woodwork, which is a good thing to see. And I will try and get some of them on this channel, interviews, because it'll be interesting to hear their stories of why they left, especially here in South Africa. Because for a long time, South Africans, there were very few and far between that I knew of, but there's there's quite a few coming out and speaking out, which is really good to see and heartwarming to witness. So yeah, I think going forward on this channel, I'm going to, in the coming week, there will be a few videos coming up where I will highlight the fact that there's going to be a membership as well on the platform. But I'll talk more about that as the week progresses, with some interesting perks for members who join the channel going forward. Maybe get a bit of special videos or membership only broadcasts in terms of other things we'd like to talk about, but that will be discussed in the coming week. And I think there's an opportunity for me to expand the channel in terms of other high control groups that we experience in this country as well. There are, I've spoken to a lot of ex-Mormons in South Africa, ex-Christians, Seventh-day Adventist, members, ex-Plymouth Brethren members in South Africa. I've had quite a few discussions with those, and it will be interesting to have them on the channel. Maybe an interview, a live broadcast as well, which will be good. So I'm going to see if I can get some of those people on, and of course more ex-Jehovah's Witnesses from South Africa to come on the show as well, because I think we need to show that not only the West, there's a mass exodus. There's an exodus. The African diaspora. I think there's also a mass exodus starting to happen. I see it not only here in South Africa, but in neighboring countries as well, and countries up north. So it's very interesting to see. Very interesting to see. There's some comments there. JM says, I can connect you with individuals out of South Africa with extensive influence and reach involving women and children's rights. The JW and LDS are on their radar. That'll be great. That'll be really, really great. I'd love that. So if you could do that, just drop me a message or and we can connect and see how we can get that going, because I would really like to have more of those types of people on the channel as well, because there's been extensive work doing in many other high control groups being done in other high control groups here in South Africa. I think the Kwasiza Bantu scandal that surfaced recently was a huge eye-opener for a lot of people. I spoke to a former member who released a book about her story there. It's called Mission of Malice, Erica Bornman. I I need to get her on the channel. She'll be very good to speak about her experience. South Africa, there's been quite a bit of cults and high control groups, that's been exposed. Thank you, JM. Really appreciate the super chat. Thank you very much. Much appreciated. Thanks. I would really love if you could put me in touch with some of those people. I think it's important because we need the resources. We need to give a lot of people all these resources in terms of where they can go to because it's mental health issues, and we need professionals to be able to come in and assist with that type of thing. Religious trauma is a huge thing, and not everybody can navigate the effects of religious trauma effectively. So yeah, I really appreciate that, JM. Much obliged. Thank you very much. So watch out for that. I think I'd like to expand the channel in that sense going forward. I think it's important because we have to have a South African. We need to get that going as well. Not to say that everybody else's story is not important. I mean, we hear the stories in the West, in the States, in Canada and the UK and so forth, Australia. But I think it's time for the African diaspora to stand up and talk about these things as well, and expose what's happening in their parts, in their neck of the woods. Thank you for everybody who's joined in the discussion. Sorry about the technical issue. Threat to the governments. I'm sure a lot of you have seen it going around as well. But we all know why that's happening. They are an organization that's clutching at straws, really, to try and really try to stem the tide of the exodus. That's they're trying to stem that tide because it's really a great crowd coming into the fold anymore. As I said, before they get involved, and once you Google Jehovah's Witnesses, all these other websites and things will come up, and it debunks a lot of their doctrine and what they have been telling people all along. It'll be interesting to see because just a last point. It'll be interesting to see. I don't know what you guys feel. Do you think that there will be a split? Over the years, there has been many, when there are things that shake up the organization, we've seen splits happen, be it small. But I think I've seen people saying that a lot of congregations, there's a few congregations that are refusing to implement the current changes that the governing body has now laid down. And that will be interesting to see if there will be an offshoot, a split of, in the organization. That'll be interesting to watch. It's happened before, not only in the early, with the Bible students, but long ago they were people that group of witnesses that have split and went and did their own thing. They kept the kingdom all. They sued the organization for the kingdom all, because we all know that the kingdom walls were taken back by the society, and I think a few congregations stood up to them. So we might, who knows, we might see another split. happen, be it a small breakaway group that refuses to, abide by the current governing body regulations and new policies. So yeah, and I think another interesting point is I think Tony Morris was an obstacle for a lot of these changes. I mean, Tony Morris was a hardliner, and it's interesting to see that immediately when he left, the changes started happening. So that might be why Tony Morris was let go. JM says, I see the core becoming more and more insular, but splinter groups are certainly possible. Yeah, I think so. I think we're going to have quite a few splinter groups in the coming years. But Morris, I think, was an obstacle. I think he was an obstacle to these changes because he was very hardline, the organization. So, interesting. The organization that we see now is totally different to the one that I was in. It's totally different to the one I was in. So that is it for this live stream tonight, folks. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you want to see more of this type of, I make some videos where I analyze a lot of the doctrine and stuff like that in my unique way. But I appreciate all the support, and let's keep it going. I think it's important. The center of Jehovah's Witnesses, the organization, is battling to hold, and we can see that the pressure is really rattling them. They are an organization on the, really trying to hold on to members now. It's starting to break. It's starting to break. It's a tide of people leaving. So I appreciate it, and until next time, look out for more videos in the coming week. I appreciate all of you. Thank you very much. Bye for now.